All right. Um, Good afternoon, everyone. There we go. I like that. Thank you so much. Um, Wonderful spring day we're having, right? I'm super excited. I'm so honored to be here as the Blue Heart senior mentor. Again, my name is James Crawford. I'm an educator and instructor at UC San Diego, Tritons representing. I'm also a PhD candidate in education studies, where my research and my passion lies in community-based organizations, community-based education programs that specifically support the healing and empowerment of Black youth. Already today, we heard some words about Black excellence, right? What does that mean? To me, that means Black joy, Black resistance, Black resilience. Looking back on our history, recognizing that, again, together we rise, and that indeed it does take a village. For these young Black men to be here today, it took a village. It took family support. It took long nights. And for me to be here, it also took that as well. As a former foster youth, someone born in Chicago, the youngest of three, my parents were unfortunately involved in what many in the 80s, early 90s, the crack cocaine epidemic, right, that hit a lot of Black and brown communities. So early on, when I came to California, being raised by my aunt, the question of who am I? Why am I here? What am I to do? How do I envision my future as a Black man in this society? Luckily, I had my aunt to provide me that rich understanding of our Black history and our Black culture so that I could be firmly rooted in developing my identity beyond the limiting ideas and stereotypes and messages that I saw in the media so often and that we still see today. When we turn on the news, when we look at social media, we're inundated, we're saturated with very limiting portrayals of what it means to be a Black man, of the type of things that we can seek to aspire to become. So to me, it's really important to think about, what do we see when we look in the mirror as Black men? What do we see in each other when we look at our peers, our other Black brothers? And a part of this question, I feel, comes back down to, how do we cultivate environments where, as Black young men, we feel uplifted, we feel supported, we feel seen, heard, and understood? And that's what Blue Heart is all about. That's why I'm so passionate about being here. This time last year was my first introduction to Blue Heart, my first event that I participated in, just viewing, right? And it was signing day of last year. Before that, I had tried to set up a meeting with Tracy Morris in February, and unfortunately he had passed right before I got a chance to meet him. But when I went to signing day, I felt his presence. When I went to signing day, I could see in all the young men, all the lives that he touched, who Tracy was and who he still is, because his impact is still felt, is still here with us. That's what I want to be a part of, and that's why I feel so passionately about Blue Heart and what we do with our young men. Because we pour into them, because we see in them not only ourselves, but who they can be, all the possibilities, all the different pathways. So we take all those limits off, take all the limiting ideas and the stereotypes that we've seen for centuries, for generations, since the beginning of this society, right? That has put Black men in a box, that has labeled us as dangerous, as deviant. And we flip that, and we say, Black excellence. We see you, young Black men. We see you. You are special. You are worthy. You are excellent. One of the things that we also have to remember is how our black young men are treated in our schools. Now, we all know it wasn't until the Civil Rights Movement, 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, that as black folks, we were even legally allowed to integrate schools. And part of the reason and the argument that was put forth in that court ruling was that separate also meant unequal. You cannot separate us as black folks in our schooling environments and expect us to have the same opportunities and resources. So we sought to integrate. But generations later, what we continue to see are the implicit biases and the same stereotypes being put upon our young black men. As early as preschool, there are various studies that indicate that when preschool teachers are looking for deviance or challenging behavior in the classroom, they more often than not focus on the black students. They more often than not focus on the black boys. We're talking about preschool. So when we fast forward and we think about the events and the tragedies that led to the social unrest and the movements during 2020, right? George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many others that we see in the news. These implicit biases, they don't just start with our interactions with the police. They don't just start when we're pulled over or when we're walking down the street wearing a hoodie like Trayvon Martin was. They start as early as preschool because these ideas, these ideologies, these perceptions are so saturated in our society, so saturated in our culture that they are replicated and reproduced in the classroom. Why is that important? Because when we send our young black boys off to school, we want them to be taught, we want them to be supported. We want our teachers to see in them that potential and possibility that we see in our own children and have that same love and care for them when we send them off to school. And yet, we still see the disproportionate disciplining of our black boys. For the same infraction that a white kid will get a slap on the wrist, we might have our black boy get put in cuffs. The reason why that's important is because not only are we having to educate our young black men, the reading, the writing, the math, the science, but we also have to help them heal from this onslaught of this pervasive level of anti-black violence, this various forms of racism. So we need the healing, and we also need the empowerment for our young black men to see themselves and what is possible, and the history and the rich culture that we come from and that we maintain, because they're not always getting that in the curriculum in their schools.